What's up, everyone? Welcome back. We're doing decals this time, and we're a little bit behind, but it's not too bad. The aircraft actually is not finished. Essentially, at this point, I have the dorsal side of the aircraft being the top completely done. I have the left-hand, right-hand sides completely done. I still have to finish up the ventral side of the aircraft being the bottom. I have done a good amount of that around the engines, but I haven't finished doing the wings or any of the forward fuselage. So I'm still working on it. I've got probably 75-ish decals left to go. Foxbot did an amazing job. These decals are great, but there's a ton of them. So working through it's been a little slow. It's also been a little hectic at work lately. So it's taken me a little longer than I originally thought. Of course, this is my excuse in every single one of these episodes. But anyway, so I'm still working on it. For now, though, I'll go ahead and put the video out. I'm not going to show every single decal because it does get a little repetitive, and realistically, it's very hard to film. A number of these decals you may notice in shots will just suddenly appear on the model. A lot of the time, I forgot to turn the camera on, so I forgot to start recording. So had the camera on, had it sitting in front of me. I'd put the decal into the water, let it soak in, pick it up, and just forget to push play or record on the camera. And so I did get most of them, but there are some where you may notice that suddenly there's a decal there that wasn't there before, and that's why. It just getting into the routine and the rhythm, it was sometimes a little easy to forget to go ahead and just flick the shutter real quick. Also, at this point, I'm probably 30 or 40 hours into decaling this. I wish that was an exaggeration, probably closer to 30. Just between, a lot of them are collectively numbered, so there'll be actually this decal right here is a good example. There's a lot of those decals. Each single one of those louvers has one, and there's two other decal numbers where it's essentially the same to me. Obviously, it's not exactly the same decal, but the lettering is so small that you can't tell them apart, and so visually they look identical. And they'll have one or two of the decal numbers around a group of like 10 of these things. So if, and these are actually 28, 29, and 30 on the sheet. So if I've got a section of the aircraft that says, hey, these are 28, section of the aircraft that says these are 29, which may be adjacent to each other, I can't tell them apart. So for a lot of these where they look close enough, it's a very slow process to go ahead and cut them a couple out at a time where I know what they are, and apply them and then come back and start over and do the next one. But overall, it's been going well. I've only destroyed, I think, 2 decals of approximately 120, I'd say I've done at this point. So that's pretty good going. I've had some issues with some of them flipping and folding back on themselves that had to be corrected. Some of that you may catch in the video if I'm quick enough to point it out. But overall, they've been going pretty well, and putting them on the model has been pretty good. And so I haven't had too many issues. These ones were a pain, though, down the louvers of the upper dorsal side intakes. They did take a while, and so I was very glad to get through all 10 of those, and all the decals around those air intakes. So anyway, that's that. So we're not going to show all of them. We will show a bulk of I will show a bulk of the top and side ones. I will show the major decals. Again, this decal kit's been really good. It's been really pleasant to work with. It's just a labor of taking your time and making sure you do it right. And so these are the standard water slide decals. You do soak them, leave it for a couple of minutes, and then go ahead, take them out. I like to use a paintbrush to try and gently pry them and push them or slide them onto the model surface. It works pretty well for me. I did actually, in one of these shots, I got the decals stuck to the paintbrush, so you'll notice that, and you'll see it happen if you're paying attention. And it wasn't too hard to get off. I just put it back on the decal paper, wetted a little bit more, sorted it out, and we were good to go. So to cover something that the eagle eye among you may have noticed, aircraft aficionados may notice, people who are really focused on the historical accuracy in this hobby will definitely notice particularly if you're familiar with Eastern European fighter aircraft. These decals and this paint scheme don't actually match the version of MiG-29 that I have. So the version I'm running is a Monogram 1990 kit. I believe it's probably based on the early MiG-29 single-seat layout. The decals and the paint scheme are based on a MiG-29 UB layout, which is actually a two-seater. And of course, it's a Ukrainian modified version of the MiG-29. So the decals are where they should be, as close as can be approximated from the two-seat layout to the single-seat layout. There is obviously some difference. The nose is a little bit longer on the two-seat, I believe. And so you end up with a little bit of spacing changes, but for the most part, every single one of these decals is in the correct location as best as can be approximated by eye. Now, going back to the crux of some things I've said before, if you're new into this hobby and you're just getting started, it is okay to build a model straight out of the box. A lot of the people that I watch do this hobby just for some inspiration, some ideas, and really just to focus on my own technique are, so far, like, the talent level is amazing. And, they're going in for the extreme washes, the extreme weathering effects. They're going in for all the photo etch sets, upgraded decals, upgraded paint schemes, all of that. And so that's awesome. I absolutely love that. I'm going to be doing something similar to that in the next couple of builds and really taking my time getting hyper detailed. But for those of you who are just starting out, it is perfectly acceptable to build a kit right out of the box. It is perfectly acceptable to kit bash. I have seen a lot of really cool kit bashed kits, and I've considered doing several myself. In fact, one of the kits I'm going to, or I guess technically two of the kits I'm going to build down the line are, I'm going to modify a 1-48 Revell B29 and build up the Edouard Bell X1. Again, kind of a tribute to Chuck Yeager, given his passing, I think it was last year. And so I'm going to take what essentially is the Enola Gay kit, and I'm going to change it into the carrying aircraft for the Bell X1 on its first supersonic flight. And so while technically that's a historically accurate kit bash, it is still a kit bash. So, this hobby is exactly what you want to make it. If you want to do something, go ahead and do it. If it turns out looking, amazing, sweet, excellent. You've met your goal. If it doesn't, don't let that stop you from trying again. Or like what I'm doing here. If you wanted to just build an aircraft that's a little different from your regular ones, you wanted to do it in a specific paint scheme, and you wanted to try out some new techniques, again, digital and stenciling was a completely new one for me, that's all perfectly fine. And it's entirely up to you. So go ahead and do it. And, if you're doing videos like this, there'll always be naysayers. That's the way it is. Just go ahead and do it and have fun, right? It's a hobby. You're not getting, unless you're entering professional competitions with this, nobody's judging you for it. Go ahead and do it and just have a good time with it. As I go through the rest of the model, I will go ahead and say that, doing these really small decals was very tricky. You are going to notice me have some difficulty placing them. The model is clear-coated. It's actually got it's not Future, it's Pledge floor wax applied to it. Essentially, it acts as a clear coat. It sounds really weird if you've never done it before. If you've done it before and you understand, you really understand. But essentially, once you get your paint job down, you want to get a nice sealing coat on top of it, because some of these paints go on with more of a matte finish, and it doesn't stick the decals very well. I actually, I think the second model I ever painted with an airbrush was an F14, and it was one of the Revell F14s. I got a upgraded VF84 Jolly Rogers decal set to go on it. And once I was finished, it looked really good. I was happy with it. It was one of the best models that I personally had ever built up until that time. Took it to work, opened the car door, lifted it out, gust of wind came through and blew half of the decals off. Not an exaggeration. I was horrified. Absolutely mortified. Now, fortunately for me, within about a month, I dropped that F14 off my desk at work. It fell about 6 feet. hit the ground, absolutely exploded. I brought it home and essentially rebuilt it. So I put it all back together. I went ahead and took all the old decals off. So that's the really nice thing about water slide decals, depending how you build the model kit. If you don't seal them in place, you can just put down water and they will pick right up. Actually, I did it right there. I had one slightly out of position. I dripped some water on it with a paintbrush, and it'll lift right back up off the surface. It may take some time depending on how long it's been there, but it will, and then you can readjust it. So I spent a good amount of time with that F14 kit lifting all the decals back up. I had to go and refill the holes that I had made in the process of reassembling the parts that had broken. And I ordered a new VF84 decal kit. And I put it on the model, and it's on my desk still to this day. Again, unfortunately, I did not seal the decals on. So I have, after, it's probably been about 4 years now. After 4 years, the decals on the vertical tails are starting to lift off. Which, I'm not worried about it. Spoiler alert, I have 3 more F14s to build. I have learned a lot since that time. I know now that I need to seal my decals onto the model. Again, we're all still learning on this, and we're all still trying new things. And so it's perfectly fine. So, in the future, we'll be treated to some F14s. I bought one of the Tamiya F14Ds, and I got a F14A for Christmas, so I'm very excited to build that kit. I've heard it's very, very well engineered, but I actually haven't built anything from Tamiya yet, despite the number that I have in my queue to build. So maybe we'll do one of those soon, but it will not be the next aircraft, unfortunately. As you may have noticed, as I tried to put that decal on, it actually folded up on itself, and so I lifted it back up onto the slide paper. And, that's the way you do it. If it starts to fold up, don't keep agitating it, because if you get it folded all the way over, it's going to be a lot harder to fix. I did have a couple that did that. I want to circle back real quick to talking about sealing decals. And roughly, where do we go from here? What does the paint job process fully look like, and how are we going to do it? So start out with, I did the paint. We've already seen that. That was a couple parts ago now, I believe. So from there, we go ahead and we will clear coat the part with essentially, so I already mentioned that I did some Pledge floor wax as my clear coat. You can get other clear coats. Tamiya make a clear coat. I imagine the other paint manufacturers do as well. I believe Testors definitely does, because I've used it previously. The reason I switched to the floor wax is it's cheaper and it does just as good of a job. So that's the way I went. Your mileage may vary depending on what you choose to do. So we go ahead and clear coat the entire model, make it really nice and glossy, and we go ahead and slide the decals on. After the decals are done, we do a very careful overcoat with, again, in my case, it's going to be the floor wax, so the Pledge floor wax, or whatever clear coat you want to choose on your own. Again, I'm probably going to do it in the glossy version. I guess there's not really any reason you couldn't do it in the matte clear coat version if you wanted, if that's what your model needs as a final surface. But we're going to do that at a low pressure, and we're just going to mist it on as carefully as we can at first, and then start doing a little bit of heavier coat afterwards. And what that's doing is you're covering over your decals. It helps to blend it into the paint job a lot more. And obviously it's going to keep them sealed down, so that if you decide to take them to the office and you open your car door to take them out of the car and take them inside to your desk, and a gust of wind comes by, half your decals don't disappear down the street. So you go ahead and put your gloss coat over that. Then we're going to weather, if you choose. I mean, realistically, for if you're new to this, you don't really want to go into the weathering, or you want your aircraft to look like it's fresh out of the factory. Maybe you're building an aircraft that only flew once, like the Spruce Goose or something like that. You want it to look new. You go ahead and you do your decals. Finish assembly if you haven't done it already. Like, this model's not finished assembly yet, so we'd have to do that. But you do that, then you go put your matte clear coat over the top of it, in this case, because it's not a shiny aircraft. You're done. Like, that's it. There's nothing really more to do. But if you want to go ahead and weather, you want to seal your decals down first. In the process of weathering, you may be using your airbrush again. You may be using paintbrushes. You're going to have to weather over some decals. And honestly, like, the way these aircraft are done or are in the actual theater or in usage, you're going to get dirt and grime over the top of your decals anyway. So yeah, in that case, you want to go ahead and just seal those decals down, coat them over with clear coat, and weather on top. So for this aircraft, I'm going to try oil staining for the first time, I think. No guarantees how that's going to go. I think I tried to do it on the A10, but I ended up essentially cleaning it all off because I got a little nervous. So that is what it is. This one I'm not as worried about, and so I'll try it on this one. We'll see how it goes. And again, this is going to be my first time doing it. It's not going to be perfect. I'm not afraid of that. So I'll do it. I'll make some mistakes. I'll correct them as best I can, and we'll eventually get this aircraft finished and up on display. So then after weathering, for this aircraft, since it's not a glossy paint job, we're going to go ahead and use some Tamiya matte clear coat at the end there just to give it back its matte surface. I did this all on the A10 as well, and so I think, I don't remember off the top of my head what the description was like on that, but feel free to check out that video, and while you're doing that, like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do. Once all the clear coating's done, as I said, we'll go final assembly, we'll put the model all together, and I think the last part on this entire series is going to be a sit-in and discussion of the model kit, what I liked, what I didn't like. Maybe I'll throw a rating scale at it. We'll see. We're not there yet. I've still probably got 2 parts before that happens, and that's 4 more weeks of me pulling my hair out trying to get videos out on time and balance some put some work-life balance into my life. Yeah, establish that if you haven't already. In the meantime, yeah, these decals, I hated doing these decals. They took a good amount of time to soak in and get loose from the transparency or the transfer paper. They're tiny. They were hard to align. You don't get a lot of leverage. It was tricky. There was also a ton of them. But, we got through it. Just persevere. Keep going. When you get frustrated, walk away. Definitely walk away. Don't let your frustration get the best of you. 6 parts in, it's probably a good time to actually talk about the aircraft, because I don't think we've done that yet. So the MiG-29 is about the size of an F-18, being the early F-18, the A through D models that were originally built in the 1980s, not the newer Super Hornet models. The program was started in 1969 to create an aircraft, mostly in response to the US FX program, and the FX program is what essentially gave the US the F-15 and the F-16. Similarly, the Soviet Union created 2 aircraft out of their program, being the MiG-29 and the Su-27. The MiG-29 has 2 engines. They are RD-33s with around about 18,000 pounds of thrust on each side. One really cool fact, one neat thing that I found is that the engines are slightly angled so that in the event of an engine out, you reduce the amount of eccentric thrust, which is a good thing because then it means less rudder control, which means less induced parasitic drag. It's a benefit to keeping the aircraft more stable in a flight characteristic when you lose an engine. The aircraft has a 30mm cannon. It's in the forward left-hand side leading edge extension. For those of you that don't know leading edge extensions, you'll see it essentially. It's the continuation of the wing profile further up the fuselage, right near the wing root. It's an aerodynamic device that helps give some better high angle performance. On the MiG-29, of course, it includes the top side intakes that help vent or bring air into the engines so they can close the underwing intakes in the event that they're on a unprepared runway surface, so they don't fog their engines. The aircraft is one that has a drogue parachute to assist with landing, which is also pretty neat. 16,000 plus of them have been built. Many of them have been exported. Most of the Warsaw Pact nations have them. Some African nations have them, like Algeria, Chad, Sudan, and Eritrea. Iraq, Iran, and Syria have them. India has both the MiG-29 and the MiG-29K. We will come back to that in just a moment. Bangladesh also has them. North Korea, Mongolia, and Myanmar have them. And in the in the western side, Western Hemisphere in the U.S. or America's side, Cuba, Peru, and the United States have them in adversarial roles. There's not a whole lot in the U.S., and there is one civilian owned in the U.S. as well. There's quite a few on display in the U.S. Mostly they were purchased from Moldova at the fall of the Soviet Union, because the U.S. didn't want them being sold elsewhere. But yeah, so the MiG-29's been pretty extensively developed. There's a few that are in special roles. There's training roles. There's different variations of combat role. MiG-29K is a carrier-capable aircraft. They operate from both of the Kuznetsov-class carriers, one being the Russian Kuznetsov, and the other belonging to India. Further development of the MiG-29 has given the MiG-35 that has upgraded avionics and weapons targeting packages. And the MiG-29 has been part of two aerobatics teams, one of those being the Russian aerobatics team, and the other being the Ukrainian aerobatics team. So at this point, we're pretty much wrapped up with decals. I will go ahead and show a picture of what the aircraft looks like with all the dorsal side decals on. As I mentioned, I'm not going to show all of the decals, and I'm not going to show the underside decals, mostly because it's a little bit trickier to film. The aircraft has to be stood up, and I don't really want to rest it on the verticals, and the essentially what would be the ejection seat if I put it upside down. I think the ejection seat does sit a little bit proud of the structure aft of the cockpit area. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. It's a lot of the same thing, right? Most of the major decals you've seen in this video. The Ukrainian roundels have got to go on the bottom of the wings. And I don't think there's anything else of particular note on the ventral side of the aircraft. Just a lot more markings like this one I'm doing here. So with that, yeah, we'll wrap this up and we'll start heading into part 7 here shortly. Actually, right as I finish recording this, I'm likely going to continue to finish the decals, and hopefully next week I'll be getting started on the actual touch-up or sealing all the decals first, and then starting to do some weathering. Weathering and some final paint details are likely to be the part 7 video. I think we'll do that. We'll probably wrap up with part 8 being final assembly, and depending on how long part 8 becomes, because there's not a whole lot of final assembly that has to be done, right? I have to put the landing gear in. I have to put some of the mechanism linkages for some of the flight controls and the landing gear itself into the aircraft. I have to put the pitot tubes and antenna on the aircraft, and then glue in the engines. So I think that's likely to be a lot of work for me, because most of those currently are unpainted. But it's not likely to be a lot of on-screen time, which I guess is a good thing. But it does make it a little bit harder to do these videos, because it means that there's not a whole lot of reward for the amount of effort being put in. So I think likely we'll have this aircraft wrapped up in part 8, and depending how long and how much footage I have for part 8, I'll do the kit review then and give this kit its due diligence and discuss it. I've complained about this kit a lot, but at the end of the day, this is a cheaper kit, so you get what you pay for, really. And that's something we're going to explore in the next aircraft, or the next 2 aircraft. I will probably reveal what that is going to be in the next, probably in the next part, probably when we're doing weathering, because there's not going to be a whole lot to talk about that in that video other than techniques, similar to how this one has progressed. And we'll wrap that up and bring in start introducing the next project. I also have a couple going on in the background. I have a 1 to 32nd de Havilland Mosquito that I need to paint, that I started building in, I think, 2016, and I didn't have an airbrush at that time, so I didn't paint it, because I wanted to really do justice to that aircraft kit and the amount of effort it was taking to build it. So I stopped working on it, put it aside, and it's still sitting unpainted on one of my shelves. I probably won't record that one, just because, well, A, there's not a whole lot of people watching these videos at this point, so there's not a whole lot of demand there. And B, it's just going to be a lot of airbrushing because it's such a large aircraft. So I won't record that. And I'm also building, I'm trying a car for the first time, so that'll be entertaining for me. I don't think I've ever done a car kit before, so I'm working on that kind of in the background. And that actually is going to be for a family friend who's provided me a lot of help with my project car recently, so I'll get that done off camera as well. And maybe we'll do a car on camera again in the future, but we'll see. Alright, thanks for watching. As I said earlier in the video, if you enjoy this type of thing, feel free to subscribe, comment, like, give me recommendations, give me tips, give me pointers, whatever you want to do. Ask questions. I'm open to anything, really. Alright, so we'll wrap it up here. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time for weathering with hopefully a fully decaled aircraft. Have a great one, you guys.